The Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the most protracted and intractable conflicts in the world. It has claimed countless lives, fueled decades of violence, and defied countless attempts at resolution. The conflict is rooted in competing claims to the same land, intertwined with religious, historical, and national narratives. This essay delves into the complexities of this enduring crisis, examining its historical roots, key issues, and the ongoing search for peace. This ongoing conflict has profound consequences for both Israelis and Palestinians, shaping their daily lives and future prospects. Understanding this conflict requires a nuanced approach, acknowledging the historical grievances and aspirations of both sides. The conflict has also reverberated far beyond the Middle East, impacting global politics, alliances, and perceptions. It has become a focal point in international relations, with countries and organizations taking sides or attempting to mediate a peaceful resolution. The quest for peace in the region remains elusive, but the human cost of this conflict demands unwavering efforts to bridge divides and find a just and lasting solution.
The seeds of the Israel-Palestine conflict were sown in the late 19th century with the rise of two competing nationalist movements, Zionism and Palestinian nationalism. Zionism sought to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine, which Jews considered their ancestral land. Palestinian nationalism, on the other hand, aimed to secure self-determination for the Arab population already residing in Palestine. These competing aspirations created tensions that escalated in the early 20th century, particularly under British rule following World War I. The British issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917, expressing support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, further fueling Zionist aspirations and Arab anxieties. Jewish immigration to Palestine increased significantly during this period, leading to demographic shifts and exacerbating tensions with the Arab population. The British found themselves caught between these competing claims, struggling to maintain order in an increasingly volatile environment. The Holocaust, with its horrors of anti-Semitic persecution, further strengthened the resolve of many Jews to establish a state of their own in Palestine, viewing it as a safe haven from persecution. This, however, heightened Palestinian fears of displacement and dispossession.
In 1947, the United Nations proposed a partition plan to divide Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab. The plan was accepted by Jewish leaders but rejected by Arab leaders who viewed it as unjust and a violation of their right to self-determination. The partition plan's failure to resolve the conflict led to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which erupted upon Israel's declaration of independence. This war resulted in Israel's victory and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, creating a refugee crisis that continues to this day. The war's outcome solidified Israel's control over a larger portion of territory than allocated in the UN partition plan, while the remaining land was divided between Egypt and Jordan. This outcome has shaped the geopolitical landscape of the region ever since. The 1948 war had a profound impact on both Israelis and Palestinians. For Israelis, it marked the birth of their nation-state and a triumph over adversity. For Palestinians, it became known as the Nakba, catastrophe, a time of dispossession, displacement and loss. The war also laid the groundwork for future conflicts as the unresolved issues of territory, refugees and Jerusalem continued to fester. These issues have become deeply entrenched over the decades, posing significant obstacles to peace. At the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict lie several key issues that have fueled decades of animosity and hindered peace efforts. These issues are complex and interconnected, encompassing disputes over land, identity, security, and human rights. One of the most contentious issues is the control of land, particularly the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. These territories were captured by Israel in the 1967 Six-Day War and have been subject to varying degrees of Israeli control ever since. Palestinians claim these territories as part of their future state and view Israeli settlements in the West Bank as illegal and an obstacle to peace. They also demand an end to the blockade of Gaza, which they consider collective punishment. Israel, on the other hand, cites security concerns for its military presence in the West Bank and its control over borders. It views settlements as a legitimate expression of its historical and biblical connection to the land. The status of Jerusalem is another major point of contention. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital, imbuing the city with immense religious, historical, and national significance. Section 5. Jerusalem, the epicenter of faith and discord. Jerusalem, a city sacred to three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, lies at the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Its contested status has fueled religious tensions and political disputes for centuries. For Jews, Jerusalem is the site of the ancient temples and the Western Wall, remnants of their holiest site. They view it as their eternal and indivisible capital, emphasizing their historical and religious connection to the city. For Muslims, Jerusalem is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam, and the Dome of the Rock, a shrine commemorating the Prophet Muhammad's night journey. They consider East Jerusalem, which houses these holy sites, as occupied territory and an integral part of their future state. Christians revere Jerusalem as the site of Jesus Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, with numerous churches and holy places dotting the city. They view Jerusalem as a shared heritage and advocate for its protection and accessibility for all faiths. The competing claims to Jerusalem have made it a focal point of conflict, with tensions often escalating around religious sites and access restrictions. The city's future remains one of the most sensitive and challenging issues in the search for peace.
Section 6. The Refugee Crisis, a Humanitarian Tragedy. The Palestinian refugee crisis, stemming from the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians during the 1948 war, remains a deeply emotive and unresolved issue in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Palestinian refugees and their descendants, now numbering in the millions, live in refugee camps and diaspora communities across the Middle East and beyond. They demand the right of return to their ancestral homes in what is now Israel, citing international law and historical justice. Israel, however, rejects the right of return, arguing that it would threaten its Jewish demographic character and security. It views the refugee issue as a matter to be resolved through negotiations with a future Palestinian state. The refugee crisis has had a profound impact on Palestinian identity and aspirations. It serves as a constant reminder of their dispossession and the unresolved injustices of the past, fueling their struggle for self-determination. The plight of Palestinian refugees has also placed a significant burden on neighboring Arab countries hosting them, straining resources and impacting regional stability. Finding a just and durable solution to the refugee crisis is crucial for achieving lasting peace in the region.
Section 7. Recent escalations and the cycle of violence. The Israel-Palestine conflict is characterized by cyclical outbreaks of violence, often triggered by specific incidents or underlying tensions. These escalations result in civilian casualties, destruction, and further entrenchment of mistrust and animosity. Recent years have witnessed a surge in violence, including the 2014 Gaza war, the 2021 Israel-Gaza conflict, and ongoing clashes in the West Bank. These confrontations have resulted in heavy casualties on both sides, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and dimming prospects for peace. Factors contributing to these escalations include the expansion of Israeli settlements, Palestinian rocket fire from Gaza, security operations by Israeli forces, and Palestinian protests against Israeli policies. The absence of a political horizon and the lack of trust between the parties further fuel the cycle of violence. These outbreaks of violence have devastating consequences for civilians on both sides. They live with the constant threat of rocket attacks, military incursions, and the loss of loved ones. The cycle of violence perpetuates trauma, deepens divisions, and makes reconciliation even more challenging.
Section 8. International Perspectives and Peace Efforts. The Israel-Palestine conflict has been the subject of numerous international peace efforts with varying degrees of success. The international community recognizes the need for a two-state solution, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. The United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and other actors have played roles in mediating negotiations, providing humanitarian assistance and condemning violence. However, their efforts have often been hampered by the complexities of the conflict, the entrenched positions of the parties, and regional dynamics. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, raised hopes for a peaceful resolution. However, the peace process stalled due to disagreements over settlements, Jerusalem, and security arrangements. The subsequent rise of Hamas in Gaza further complicated peace efforts. Despite the setbacks, the international community continues to advocate for a negotiated two-state solution, recognizing that it is the only viable path to achieving a just and lasting peace. Diplomatic efforts focus on reviving negotiations, addressing final status issues, and building trust between the parties.
Section 9. The human cost of conflict. The Israel-Palestine conflict has exacted a heavy human cost, leaving deep scars on both societies. Generations have grown up amidst violence, fear, and uncertainty, with their lives profoundly shaped by the conflict's legacy. Palestinians in the occupied territories face restrictions on movement, access to resources, and economic opportunities. The blockade of Gaza has created a humanitarian crisis, with limited access to essential goods, healthcare, and education. Israelis too bear the brunt of the conflict, living with the constant threat of rocket attacks, terrorism, and military service. The psychological toll of living in a perpetual state of conflict is immeasurable. The conflict has also fueled hatred, prejudice, and mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians. Stereotypes and misinformation perpetuate animosity, making coexistence and reconciliation even more challenging. It is essential to acknowledge the human cost of this conflict and the suffering it has inflicted on both sides. Recognizing the shared humanity of Israelis and Palestinians is a crucial step towards building empathy and understanding.
Section 10. The path forward towards a just and lasting peace. The path to a just and lasting peace in the Israel-Palestine conflict remains arduous and uncertain. However, the pursuit of peace is a moral imperative, driven by the need to end the cycle of violence, alleviate human suffering, and create a better future for both peoples. Achieving peace requires courageous leadership, political will, and a genuine commitment to dialogue and compromise. It necessitates addressing the root causes of the conflict, including the occupation, settlements, security concerns, and the refugee crisis. A two-state solution based on the 1967 borders with mutually agreed-upon land swaps remains the most viable option for peace. This would involve establishing a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with East Jerusalem as its capital, coexisting alongside a secure Israel. However, achieving a two-state solution requires addressing several critical issues, including borders, security arrangements, the status of Jerusalem, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees. These are complex and sensitive issues requiring creativity, flexibility, and a willingness to make painful compromises on both sides. The international community has a crucial role to play in supporting peace efforts, providing incentives for dialogue, and holding parties accountable for violations of international law. International pressure can create a conducive environment for negotiations and discourage unilateral actions that undermine the peace process. Ultimately, peace in the Israel-Palestine conflict will depend on the ability of Israelis and Palestinians to overcome decades of mistrust, recognize their shared humanity, and embrace a future based on mutual respect, coexistence, and cooperation. The journey towards peace will be long and challenging, but the pursuit of a just and lasting solution must remain unwavering.